were thinking just starting off actually with just talking about what a DAO is, why someone would choose to utilize a DAO, what it could mean for a normal business, right? So one of the things we were thinking of is if you're interested in going this route, talking about like your school, right? Like
Yeah.
how might one
So
use
I'll
it
get to that first, but I want to answer your first question first because I think a lot of people they misconstrue what a DAO is. So they talk about DAOs as if they are a type of government. Or a different way of building a government. And that's really the wrong way of thinking about it. A DAO is a different medium upon which a governing structure can be written. So typically the medium that governing structures are written, well, is on like you could almost call them sort of if-then statements written on paper that hierarchies of humans are supposed to carry out. If X number of voting tokens as collected by this branch of and counted by this group of humans says this, then we take this group of humans and we put them here, and it is enforced through a legal structure. So you could say sort of the medium is legalism and humans, whereas DAOs are writing a government on top of code, really. People can get more into like the crypto aspects of it, and yes, the Web3 aspect of DAOs does make it less interferable with than like just writing it on code. It's more in the way that Web3 has that sort of permanent uninterferable presence in the online ecosystem that has made governments written on code more potentially valuable. But that is the core difference and thing you're changing. And where this matters to the end user, like if you're thinking like to an average person, is actually, so obviously as soon as somebody can do this in the crypto space, a lot of people are going to do it just to do it, right? Like I liken it to sort of like you can make Doom run on like a refrigerator computer, and like people have done this, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but like obviously that's not like an efficient use of a refrigerator computer, right? Like, to have that on your fridge screen. And it's the same with DAOs, right? The biggest mistake and the biggest I'd say problem with DAOs right now in terms of where they can be operated is that people try to run them on top of governing structures that are run on the traditional medium. So this would be like I'm running a DAO that like tracks real estate purchases or something, and I'm doing it in the United States. Well, the problem is that if the traditional governing structure supersedes the DAO, which it always does if you're operating in like a developed country, then the DAO becomes kind of pointless. By that, what I mean is, okay, the DAO says this person owns this land. Somebody disagrees, they get a lawyer, they then supersede the DAO, they go to the traditional government, then they take control of the land or the asset. The DAO says this person should be president, but this person disagrees because of, I don't know, diversity laws or something, right? And so they go and they use it to supersede the DAO, which means that the DAOs are really only superior as a governing style within a few very specific contexts. One is where you don't have those traditional governing structures, or when something is operating between areas, like between a lot of them, where you might not have clear judicial authority. So like operating in a really developed country with like a really bad governing structure, that would be an example. Another example of where they could be really high utility is if you have a governing structure with pseudonymous members and stakeholders. By that, what I mean is it could allow, for example, like a company where stakeholders are actually anonymous. Now, the i.e. shareholders, like the people voting on what's happening, are actually anonymous. And you can't easily do that with a traditional governing structure. The problem here being that that's illegal in most developed countries. Because they were meant to operate with these traditional governing structures. So that's why they make things like that illegal. The final thing with DAOs where they could get really interesting, and this is actually a first. We haven't mentioned this publicly because it only has just come to our attention. We only just started moving forwards on it. Is we've been involved in the Charter City movement for a while, like seeing what's happening in it and everything like that. And we're even partnered with Praxis, like the Collins Institute. and we now have a donor who is interested in sponsoring us to create a charter city. And we would make the core governing structure of this a DAO, which to my knowledge, none of the existing charter cities are doing right now, which is kind of surprising to me. I mean, they have the option to create governing structures from the ground up. DAOs are, I think, intrinsically superior in a lot of ways, like if you're talking about just like ownership metrics and stuff, and we can get into exciting stuff about that. But anyway, that's anything you wanted to dig deeper on with that question or answer?
I think we went straight to the PhD level, which is super exciting for me. There's a lot of stuff I want to dig into, but I want to back out of it a little bit. But first, I want to say, how do I get on the list for this charter city? Because I'm looking to mix up my geography. We should definitely chat about that. I'm happy to explore that. But to kind of back out of the conversation a little bit and kind of ground it, what would you say is a good way to communicate just what a DAO is? We could start there.
What a DAO is. Well,
yeah. I could also pull up a definition and maybe we can talk about it.
I mean, you could pull up a definition, but I would say that meaningfully, it's just a governing structure that is meant to govern humans written in code. So instead of writing a company's governing structure on a sheet of paper and submitting it with your LLC or whatever, you're writing it into code itself, and that code is often or always, I think, definitionally within a DAO run on Web3. But that's the core difference, right? So I guess you could say, I don't know, is there a simpler way to say it than that? Maybe you can find a definition.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you tapped into the key technical aspect. I feel like in Web3, there's often this kind of political ethos that are embedded in the definitions of the way it's talked about. And so as an example, I'll just pick going to Cointelegraph. It's like, second result on Google when you're trying to find out what a DAO is. They say a decentralized autonomous organization is an entity with no central leadership. Yeah. Decisions get made from the bottom up, governed by a community, organized around a specific set of rules enforced on a blockchain. DAOs are internet native organizations collectively owned and managed by their members. They have built-in treasuries that are only accessible with the approval of their members. Decisions are made via proposals the group votes on during a specified period. How do you feel about that framing?
That's just like none of that's true. So that is like generally characteristic of many DAOs that exist today, but it would narrow your thinking of DAOs to the extent that you would not see the vast areas of utility for DAOs. So like the way the treasury is structured, you could change the way the treasury is structured. You could have a DAO that's a revolving dictatorship, but the dictator is chosen pseudonymously by like token holders. The only core thing is that it's written on blockchain. But what they're describing there, and I think it's interesting to note for your listeners, is that DAOs have a culture around them. And this culture often goes down predictable pathways, like trying to create even more democratic forms of governing structures, as it was describing there, even more sort of bottom-up management, even more like, yes, those are true of the type of people who get involved with DAOs often, and that is an important thing to note. Of course, if you're building governing structures on blockchain, you're going to attract a bunch of libertarians. I do not think that is actually where the most interesting things that are being done with DAOs or that could be done with DAOs are going to be. So as I was use a DAO to create a governing structure for this proposed charter city, this charter city will likely have a triumvirate dictator model, like revolving dictator model, which is almost the antithesis of what they described.